We are back. So video number 6, we've done baseline of what you need to track to begin with, how to get your physiology at baseline kind of starting point to actually make sure that everything else you do makes sense. We've touched up on some nutrition bits, and we're going to probably dwell into micronutrients. So as you said, pick up some heavy hitters, which are the most essential ones, and probably explain why. Well, it's probably going to make sense to people why you can't just live on cream of rice and protein shakes. And this is why you need to eat real food.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I mean, really, we can just kind of start with vitamins or minerals, right? But the key, so I mean, a lot of these things, everybody knows what they are, as far as like what it is, like copper, for example. People know what copper is, right? But what does it actually do in your body?
Yeah.
That's useful.
When you say everyone probably knows it, they probably heard of it, but nobody probably thinks that, hey, this is in food.
Well, yeah, you're right there. Everybody can see it, especially if everybody takes a multivitamin.
It's easy for you, like someone who's
but even the people
don't know where to start. This would be like,
that's true.
Okay, this is something I need to know.
Because some people don't even read what's on their multivitamin, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Most of the people probably have heard of zinc and magnesium, and because those are the most popular ones in terms of how they are pushed in advertisements and whatnot. But all others are like chromium. Not many people ever talk about chromium, which is quite essential for your body to work properly.
Oh yeah, especially when it comes to like insulin management and just assisting in making sure that you're processing carbohydrates correctly and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I mean, we'll just start with chromium. Chromium does that. It facilitates how well your body uses or how well insulin is going to act on your cells. So makes you more insulin sensitive, helps with that. That's a very good thing. Where would you get that? You can obviously supplement it, but you're also going to be getting it from your foods if you're eating things like beef, poultry, fish, broccoli. Those are all going to contain chromium. Copper, I just talked about that. It frees iron to be used for the manufacturing of red blood cells. Everybody, especially women, tend to always have lower iron values, that sort of stuff. But sometimes it's not that they're not consuming foods with iron, because a lot of things have foods with iron. All red meats do, lentils do. There's quite a few vegetables that even have iron. But that doesn't mean that you're using your iron very well if you happen to be copper deficient or not getting a sufficient amount of copper, right? So where do you get copper? That's going to be the biggest ones are going to be shellfish, and seafoods are going to contain like the most bioavailable amount of copper. Then there's legumes. So if you're eating, nuts, that's also going to have some of that. And then you have iodine. Iodine is going to be extremely helpful for making sure that your thyroid functions correctly. And it also is involved in cellular growth. So, that's pretty important for some people. They're trying to make, composition changes, all of those really, the copper, the iodine, the iron, and the chromium, all of those influence a lot of the things that we've been talking about in the previous episodes: maintaining your insulin sensitivity, maintaining oxygen at the cellular level, that sort of, those 4 right there have crucial roles in all of that stuff. For iodine, where are you going to get that? You're going to get that from seafood, dairy, and iodized salt. And you're going to see kind of a trend. A lot of these foods that I'm going to mention are seafood based, meat based, and vegetable based. You're not going to hear anything like you need to supplement this, other than maybe 1 or 2 of the things that we'll talk about.
And it's even, can you like touch up on like when you supplement, sometimes you can have some things that your body can't even work with, like B12. I believe 3 or 4 forms of B12, and some of it is just completely useless.
Yeah, yeah, and that's very common. That phenomenon you're talking about is with minerals, for example. That's very, very common. So magnesium is a great example. A lot of people will say, "Oh, I take magnesium," but then you ask them to show you what magnesium they're taking. They're taking magnesium oxide. That's not really going to do anything. It'll make you shit your pants. I mean, that's kind of what it's for. It'll cause gastric motility and make you have diarrhea,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that you absorb the magnesium in any substantial rate to be effective at what we want. Um, like it's a crucial component of bones and teeth and nerve transmission and muscle contraction. So it's magnesium is super important. Just like you said, a lot of people probably know about magnesium. It's very advertised, but then they don't look into it any further than, oh, I need some magnesium, so they just go buy a magnesium product. Where you and I would go and look at the bottle and be like, oh, that's only magnesium oxide. That's worthless to me. That doesn't do anything. Where
Absolutely. And more often than
you're
not, people think that magnesium calms you down when it gets involved in kind of activation of ATP as well. You know,
right. Right. So yeah, I mean, it's not just, hey, I'm going to take magnesium and it puts me to sleep. Magnesium and all of these are involved in all cellular process, including the sympathetic side of things. So this is one of those things where when you start dealing with primarily supplements, hey, I get all of my micros and from supplements. You don't have control of exactly how it's being absorbed and when your body's utilizing it. As smart as we think we are, we're just not smart enough to do it that way, right?
that's something we touched up on last video where we talked about that nutrition is advanced kind of science and whatnot. We still don't know so much about it, like
Yeah,
how different foods affect. Even they might be same calories, same macros and whatnot, but there might be some things that we don't even know that's needed to make it efficient and actually benefit for our body. That's
yeah.
why
Well,
taking a supplement doesn't really get you much far.
no, no, definitely not. I mean, I'll just name. I'll name all these minerals, right? And then I'm going to name the primary foods that they're in, and you'll notice that. Well, just for example, leafy green vegetables, broccoli, spinach, potatoes, uh, and pineapples. These are all just fruits and vegetables, right? But they all have key contributions like magnesium, calcium, potassium, and uh, sulfur, and other things like that. Those are all in the plant, and the plant has flavonoids and other types of plant matter that actually probably influence how you absorb these things.
Yeah.
Like it's all one thing. Just like, oh, for example, your neurotransmitters don't just do one thing, right? Like everybody's like, oh, if I get depressed, then I just need a serotonin uptake inhibitor, an SSRI, right? Well, maybe your depression has nothing to do with your serotonin and it's a different neurotransmitter that's messed up. I'm not giving advice on depression or anything, but that is a reality, right? And doctors know this. So it things function not just in one manner in your body. In fact, it's very highly dependent on all of the other things going on in your body and all of the other things you're taking in. It's very complicated when it comes to trying to fix an issue or something like that, because you actually have 3 or 4 different pathways that are probably doing multiple things that are doing counteracting each other and forcing each other to do that. It's no different than minerals and vitamins. They are all within food for a reason, because that food probably has some things that make it able to uptake the things that you need and not uptake the things that you need. For example, you can overdo copper, you can overdo selenium, you can overdo zinc. If you just start pounding a bunch of bioavailable minerals like that, you could end up taking too much of them very easily if you aren't really keeping track of what you're taking and how much you're taking along with all the foods. So you start with the foods for sure, because then that for the most part your body and the foods themselves are going to handle the uptake and the absorption and all of that.
So when you look on all this, it's kind of, yeah, okay, it's important to have this and it's important to have that. Uh, and this is where we revert to baseline. What I sometimes see is people go, a little bit beyond just basics, since I start tracking, oh, what kind of micronutrient profile do I have in my blood? So how important that actually is for someone to check all that before they even know how to, let's say, walk properly, which I mean before they even have checked their red blood count, kidney health, liver health, all those kind of things, and put their physiology in kind of a good state to start making progress. Is this something anyone should even consider before they get to the place that we talked about in previous 4, 5, 6 videos?
Well, so some of the big, like, the big reward things that already come in your blood, we briefly touched about it when it comes to getting a blood test and having all your electrolytes. Well, some of those electrolytes are some of these minerals, like potassium, like sodium, like phosphorus. So some of these are actually going to show up in your basic test anyway. And so if those are come back low, then you go, oh, okay, well, that already starts to tell me, hey, if I'm low on potassium and low on phosphorus and high on sodium, you can automatically start going, okay, well, how much processed food am I eating versus how much vegetable matter? Because those are actually my favorite. So those three: sodium, potassium, and phosphorus. Phosphorus is going to tell me how much beef, salmon, eggs you're eating, right? Because those are the predominant ones that are going to come in that, because you're not going to get very much phosphorus from protein
Yeah.
bars and protein shakes, right? So if that comes back low, I'm like, okay, well, what's your meat intake? What are you eating for beef or salmon or eggs? More often than that, it's like, maybe once a week, right? And so then I'm like, okay, well, we need to fix that. And then potassium starts, everybody will correlate it with like bananas and stuff like that. I'm like, well, you actually get way more potassium from like spinach by a long shot, and things of that nature. So I actually link potassium more to like leafy greens. It starts to tell me directly how much vegetable matter are you eating, right? If that's also low, then we can automatically go to there. And then sodium is inversely correlated. If sodium is sky high, it can be one of two things. Either you're not drinking enough water. So again, back to something we've already talked about, or you're consuming way too much processed foods. So the typical American diet, right? When I see it in electrolyte balance, yep, you'll see phosphorus, potassium, and phosphorus, potassium, and the chloride will go with the sodium. So it's phosphorus, potassium. They'll go to the lower end. They'll be at the lower end or flagged low, and sodium and chloride will be at the upper end and or flagged high. Immediately, the first thing I say is, okay, let's check your water. Is this a hydration problem? And then after a week of doing that, then I also have them, track their food at that time, and I'm like, how much vegetables and how much processed foods? And sure enough, it's almost always very little real food, a lot of processed food, and also very little water. So it's the combination of all the things that we talked about in the previous episodes. And so you can see that right away in just your basic blood test. The only thing that I like to include that's not on your basic blood test that is, it's not even really a mineral or a vitamin, but it's extremely crucial, is your omega-3 index. So I do like to track that, and that's a supplemental blood marker. The reason for that is omega-3s, specifically DHA, have crucial roles in being a structural component to cells, specifically like brain cells, nerve cells, all of that type of stuff. And a lot of people don't know this. It is a fat, but it does not get used for energy. Your body does not burn it up. It's not a thing that gets burned up for fuel. It's a thing that gets reserved and held onto very tightly because of its crucial role in the structural component of cells. Think of it almost like, cells don't actually like link up like a lock and key, not directly, right? It's more of here's a receptor on the cell, and then let's just say your insulin comes in, and it doesn't actually make contact. What it does is these get lined up enough that they stay there magnetically, okay? This part of the cell, it can move if the cell membrane is pliable, okay? It can move, so now it can actually sense, because it's a magnet. Literally, it's a magnet. So if this comes in here, this can move and get attracted, and now you're linked up and you're making the correct process. But if this cell is stiff, then even if this is really close, this isn't going to move and link up. It's going to stay there. Now it has to depend on your insulin to get in there. So it's not nearly as efficient. And this has to do not just with insulin, every single thing that ever makes reception with a cell does this. So if your DHA, your omega 3 is low, well, now you have stiff cell membranes, which means that every process that has to interact with a cell is now being limited. Okay, so I do check omega 3 index that is not part, and it's not really that expensive, but it's not part of your regular workup. And there's starting to become more and more information on, hey, cholesterol is not really that valuable for heart disease or any of that stuff, but omega 3 index is. And the reason is, and you can kind of start to put some pieces together, a lot of cardiovascular disease comes from stiff vascular structure, right? Well, what is going to make all cells more pliable? Omega 3s, right? Because they're a crucial component of the structural part. So I do check omega 3s. That's the only blood test that I'm like, it's worth tracking. It is directly tied to food because the only way you're getting enough omega 3s in your body is through food. So that is the one thing where I go.
This is why it brings back how important it was to do your blood test first, to actually understand where you're at before you jump and get into, hey, what supplement should I take? What diet should I follow? What training should I do? Like, let's have a look what you actually need. It's like taking car to garage and say, oh, swap everything. And you're like, swap everything for what? I need this type of brakes, these type of tires, this. And you actually brought a tricycle. Like, it doesn't even have an engine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You put whatever the hell you want, you're not going to fix anything because we just don't know what's needed, so to speak. Not even fixing what's out of alignment. And let's be honest, like more often than not, there is something that's not optimal, even for ourselves. Like I have a blood testing kit on my table, but I'm going to wait for a couple of weeks until I do my blood test. I do blood tests no less than every 6 months.
Yeah, that's my minimum as well. Every 6 months I do that, and then if it's a little bit more stressful time of life or whatever, then I'll just order a test right then and there and take it within a week or two of feeling that. And in fact, most of the time I have a blood kit test just sitting in my house, right? So I can just take it whenever I want. But yeah, I always have 2 for the year, 1 every 6 months. And then if there's anything weird going on or extra stress in life or extra traveling or any of that, I'll take some, especially when, for me, traveling, and this is probably going to really touch with a lot of people that might be listening, traveling makes it hard to stay on point with food intake and stuff like that. So if there's going to be a stint of like a month or 2 of traveling, I'll usually run a blood test in the middle of that, just to say, hey, pay attention to what I'm doing, what's going on.
We go into Vegas, we need blood test afterwards.
Yeah. Well, especially Vegas.
We don't drink that. So, but this is what I think also is important to kind of highlight. It's not that you're doing blood tests to find what's wrong. It's to make sure that you are not getting worse. Like you're not damaging your body more than you already have. That is way more important to maintain your health than trying to chase the optimal form, which can cause excessive stress on your body.
Yeah. At first, like if somebody's brand new to any of this, the first blood test is probably going to be eye-opening and tell you all the things that you still need to do, right? But then after that first or 1 or 2 blood tests, you already should know, you should know, hey, this is the things I need to concentrate on, which should make it more doable, right? Because often I see on blood tests where it's like they have like 5, 6, 7 markers that are out of whack, but then when you go and you actually list all the items that affects those markers, it almost always comes back to like 3 or 4 major things. So instead of like, oh, I'm going to take this supplement and this supplement and do this and then do this, you have like 10 things on your list that you should be doing because you have 10 items that are out of whack. But if you just take a step back and then you go, oh, what I really need is more vegetables and water and some fatty fish. And that's 3 things. I'm like, that's a lot more doable than trying to remember all these 10 things that you're trying to get accomplished. So you really have to take, because a lot of these things, like we've been talking about, just go back to what are you eating? That's like step 1. right?
And
And
this is, I think, is also when you track a metric, for example, when you track your client and whatnot, you usually have your key performance indicators, your body weight, your measurements, your this, your that. But they are just that. They are indicator of performance. So because your selenium is low, it doesn't mean you need to take selenium straight away. You
right,
just need to look back. What is the critical driver for it to be low? Okay, I'm not eating enough this, and that. It's not that you need to take supplements straight away. It's like, okay, what actually has caused this? It's not the
yes.
lack of supplement, it's something else. And I think that needs to be kind of understood. When you track your body weight, you're not tracking your body weight. You really wouldn't have to step on a scale if you track your training and nutrition, would you?
Yeah, oftentimes I go months without ever tracking my weight, uh, and that's almost always when training is pretty much consistent, right? Like every week is exactly the same, and my food is in and out almost exactly the same, and I'm basically in robot mode, right? Everything's on a schedule, everything's working correctly. I hardly ever step on a scale, but I know where it should be, and a month or two later, I'll step on the scale and be like, oh. Perfect. I'm exactly where I thought I should be. Right.
Yeah, because you
Um,
have that mental capacity to understand, hey, my training is, you always track your training, always.
mhm.
And then your nutrition kind of comes there. And then everything
Yeah.
else will fall into
Ev-
place.
yeah. And every time I start like a new phase, right? Because I kind of view it as like the seasons, right? Everything kind of changes with the season, whether my kids are in school or out of school or it's summertime or wintertime. So each season I do track my nutrition like pretty diligently for 2 or 3 weeks just to get a feel for how it should go and making sure that, hey, I am actually eating what I should be eating. And then after that, it's kind of on autopilot. And a
Yeah.
lot of people are going to find this. I don't care even if you're like, because everybody's like, oh, I get bored of eating the same thing again. I'm like, yeah, but if you pick 3 or 4 or 5 meals, right, and you make those very consistent, like, hey, this meal has exactly what I need, this meal has exactly what I need, and you have 4 or 5 of them that are different, trust me, you don't get bored. You actually end up not eating all 5. You actually end up eating only 3 of those
Yeah,
meals because you are a creature of habit, right? I don't
absolutely.
care.
And to me, a powerful tool is nutritional uh, diary. So
Mhm.
give give yourself a timeline where you track what you do, and sooner or later you'll realize you're doing the same exact stuff all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Literally, you like I've had people telling me, yeah, but I can't eat same exact every single day. And I said, write me down for next 7 to 14 days what you do. And then we sit down and I'm like, you're eating the same exact thing every single day.
Yeah,
It's just not
yeah,
what your body needs.
yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm getting at. Like a lot of people, I run into that exact same thing. I don't know if I can do it like that. I'm like, you're already doing it. You're just doing the wrong things. You're choosing the wrong foods to repetitively eat. I'm trying to get you to substitute them for the right foods. You mentioned selenium. So selenium, it's a antioxidant. It's a thyroid hormone. It helps with thyroid hormone production. It helps with your immune system. Selenium is very important for a lot of things. Um, where do you get it? You get it from beef, pork, seafood, and nuts. Okay, so right away we said seafood is important for copper. Seafood is important for iodine. Seafood is important for selenium. And then we go on the vitamin side. There's some vitamin K in seafood, or sorry, not vitamin K, vitamin D in seafood. There is also vitamin B12 in seafood. You see what I mean? So just including some seafood, you start knocking out a lot of these, right?
Yep.
And then you go, okay, so what does spinach bring? Well, spinach brings some vitamin B1. It brings vitamin B2. It brings vitamin B3. Um, it brings on vitamin folate B9. It also brings in vitamin K. Then you go over the mineral side. You have calcium. You have magnesium. So spinach and seafood. I just named 2 foods. Okay, and I've literally knocked out easily 12 to 15 major vitamins and minerals that have lots of influence in your body. I,
And these are
I
two main things that people don't want to eat.
yeah, exactly. So if anybody's listening, I just gave you a key component of your diet. if you just include more seafood and more spinach, right? I just said seafood. So just pick your favorite fatty fish. Mine's salmon. I just eat a lot of salmon, right? But it can be any other, it can be mackerel, herring. Herring's also very good. It can be oysters. It can be shrimp, right? Pick a seafood, pick a leafy green vegetable. I like spinach because it's easy to get everywhere. Those two things start nailing down easily 70% of your nutritional requirements, right? Make those your new habits. And now you're going to be off way better than you were before if you weren't eating those. If you weren't eating those, you're definitely going to have imbalances and deficiencies in some of these vitamins and minerals. I can almost guarantee you that. And the fatty fish for sure. Anybody here that has never gotten their omega-3 index tested, you should definitely get it tested. I'll tell you right now, if your omega-3 index is below 5, so 5%, um, you are going to benefit immensely from bringing up your omega-3 index via the form of fatty fish or fatty seafood. And just so people know, an omega-3 index, the way it does it is, I mentioned that omega-3s, specifically DHA, form some of the structure of the cell. They take your blood, they take your red blood cells, and they actually see how much of the cell membrane is DHA. That's what they're doing. So when I say an omega-3 index of 5, that means that 5% of your cell membrane has DHA on it. If you can jack that up to 7 or closer to, if you're at 10, that's a lot. That's a very good. You're doing excellent. But if you're 5 and below, you actually put yourself at higher risk for all kinds of cancers, all kinds of cardiovascular disease, just because your cells are now stiff and they aren't going to be able to be as efficient with all of the processes that go on every single second of your day.
Yeah, and you can obviously try to stay hydrated and whatnot, but you still need that nutrient to actually make everything work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you'll find a lot of people are very deficient in that particular nutrient.
So you touched up on vitamin D.
Yes.
So that's something I track all the time because living in UK, you don't get much sun.
Yes. Yes.
Another like big hitters, like we mentioned before, was probably worth dwelling deeper into is zinc, magnesium, and a bit more about chromium. Like how important chromium actually is for improving efficiency of your body using insulin for storing glucose and all those kind of things.
Yeah, yeah. So let's start with zinc. So zinc is involved in the production of hemoglobin. It's involved in your immune system. It's is essentially a component of hundreds, literally hundreds, probably essential molecules in your body. Where do you get it naturally from food? Oysters have the most, right? So again, that seafood component comes in. Beef has quite a bit. All kinds of beans have quite a bit. And it is worth, especially if you're trying to, transform your body, have a little bit of performance metrics, it is worth, in my opinion, getting a very bioavailable form of zinc to take supplementally, like a ZMA product. But yeah, so right off the bat, it's involved in hemoglobin production. Well, hemoglobin is the main thing that's going to carry oxygen into the cell, right, and release it towards the cell. That is the major, if you refer back, I think 1 or 2 episodes ago, that was a whole episode of oxygenating, bringing up your aerobic capacity. Well, zinc now has a direct tie-in to that whole system. So zinc becomes incredibly important there. Then you mentioned magnesium. Again, component of bones, teeth, nerve transmission, muscle contraction, very, very important with all of the performance things, changing your body, all of that stuff. You're going to get that from leafy green vegetables and whole grains. And again, a ZMA product, it is worth taking a ZMA product to get a little extra magnesium, because it's hard to, like, even if you were dedicated to eating a lot of spinach, you still need quite a bit to get enough magnesium if you're athletic in any sort of way. And that's going to be luckily combined in a ZMA product. Zinc and magnesium together, they're that crucial. You can just take them as a supplement on top of mentioning this on top of
Yeah,
making sure that
as
your
a
nutrition.
supplement, can you understand?
Yeah, making sure, actually supplementing, not substituting. That's what we're trying to do. Um, and then copper has, just like zinc, a direct tie-in to how red blood cells bring iron, or bring oxygen. Sorry, copper does it through the usage of iron, and it's also involved in antioxidants, again, immune system. So we're basically all these things that we're hitting on has something to do with how you carry oxygen and how you perform, has something to do with your immune system and how you perform. If you're nailing those two things down as a human, immune system and performance, oxygen carrying capacity, you're ahead of a lot of people by a long, long ways. And so, copper comes from shellfish, nuts, legumes, and you can take a bioavailable form of copper, like a chelated copper form would be probably the best, because there's a lot of copper supplements out there that they're not bioavailable. They're usually like copper oxide or something like that, another metal tied to it, and it's not going to do anything. Um, chromium is super, super important when it comes to, just if you happen to be somebody that, you know shifts more towards carbohydrates, right? If you are that person and you are not getting enough chromium in, you're shorting yourself, because uh, chromium assists with how insulin sensitive the cells are, or how easily insulin can interact with the cell. And that, if you're eating a whole lot of refined carbohydrates but you are low on chromium, you're basically setting yourself up for insulin resistance, because your insulin is now having to work harder to shuttle those new carbohydrates or glucose into the cell without chromium. So if you are somebody who predominantly eats a lot of carbohydrates, as far as like the bulk of your calories after you've met your other needs, then you probably are going to benefit from supplementing some chromium, and emphasizing that it comes from broccoli, beef, poultry, and fish. If you're eating those foods already and you eat carbohydrates on top of those foods, if you're a normal person, you're probably going to be totally fine if you're concentrating on those first foods that I just said. And if you are eating beyond, right, you're trying to grow or something like that, grow more muscle tissue, and you're concentrating on carbohydrates, then you will want to supplement some chromium, because you're essentially limiting your ability to use them for no real reason.
Yeah, this is something we touched up in a beginning. Like, this is why you can't just eat your cream of rice, drink your protein shakes, drink your carb drinks in a training session and whatnot, and expect that everything is just gonna magically make you superhuman. You need to cover those basic needs that your body actually requires to just make that food work for you.
Yes, absolutely. And then
So
vitamin D and vitamin K are on the vitamin side, are very crucial as well. Vitamin D, just like you said, if you're anywhere in the northern hemisphere, or I think 20 or 30 latitude south or north of the equator, if you live anywhere past those places, you're definitely going to want to include some vitamin D. So people that live in Australia, people that live in South Africa, people that live in UK, people that live in Canada, people that live in the upper end of North America and upper end of uh, a, um, Asia, yeah, upper end of Asia, and like Romania, Russia, those places, you're going to want to include some vitamin D. You're just not really going to get enough sunlight to, even if you are outside a lot, because half the year the sun is not at the right angle to help you make vitamin D anyway.
it's like where I come from. In
And
Christmas
then
time, you probably have 2 hours of sunlight. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then vitamin K is super crucial when you start supplementing. I always want to supplement vitamin K2 with vitamin D, because increasing vitamin D does increase the uptake of calcium. And you don't want calcium to be deposited in arteries. That would be, plaque buildup. It doesn't mean you're by default going to build it there. But when you have sufficient amount of vitamin K to go along with the vitamin D, it's way more unlikely that there will be calcium deposits in soft tissues generally. So that includes joints, that includes arteries, and that sort of stuff. It's going to be shifted more towards depositing them in bones, which we do want. So I do include those together, as far as like, those are probably going to be supplemental because you're just not going to be able to get them all from food. And you probably want to include both of those together, vitamin D and K2 together.
So I believe if we round it all up, the most important would be magnesium, copper, sodium. Sodium is something we didn't really touch up on, but it's essential for everything in your body. Zinc, calcium, chromium, selenium, iodine. Am I missing anything?
Yeah, just the omega-3s is the only thing, the omega-3s, but and then just a short little caveat on sodium. Sodium, if you are a normal sized individual, you're probably not going to run into a deficiency unless you're one of these people that literally does cook everything that they like. They don't eat any processed food. Then at that point in time, I would say, perfect, you're doing it great. Now just salt your foods, right? Salt your foods very well, and you're going to be a lot better off. People that are larger, 100 kilos and bigger, even maybe 90 kilos and bigger, you're going to have to supplement some sodium. And by supplementing, I just mean salt everything very well. And you'll probably want some salt tablets or some salt electrolyte powder to add to some drinks every now and then, especially when it's hot and that sort of stuff. So sodium is super
The bigger
crucial.
you get, the more essential it becomes.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So, and I think that's also emphasizes why when you do your basic blood test, micronutrients and vitamins and all those kind of things, yes, they play a role, but it's somewhere down the line.
Yep, absolutely.
So I believe that's going to be a good wrap for today, and we're gonna carry on our next videos. Anything else you want to add on this topic?
No, not really. Pretty much that's it. We kind of touched on lots of different foods and just main foods that cover a lot of things.
Yeah, awesome. Well, on that note, we're gonna wrap it up, and I'll speak to you on next video.
Thanks.
Thank you.